Hi, this is Justin Colletti from Sonic Scoop, coming at you from the legendary Avatar Recording Studios. And thanks to B&H, we get to bring you an interview with the also legendary Joe Chiccarelli. Joe Chiccarelli is one of our favorite producers and engineers. He started working with Frank Zappa ages ago and is making cutting-edge records still to this day with artists like The Shins, The White Stripes, Spoon, Morrissey, Alanis Morissette, all sorts of cool stuff. Very excited to do this interview. Let's jump right to it. Let's go a little deeper into mixing then. What are some of the most essential tools in your mixing system? And then do you have a kind of master bus processing chain that you often rely on?
If I'm mixing analog, I'm mixing at Sunset Sound, and they have a custom-built API console. It's very unique sounding. It's very fat, very warm sounding, but not slow. It's API EQs and somewhat API design circuitry. So it's aggressive sounding. It really imparts a character on the record. It's very thick sounding, but not weighty or slow sounding.
Yeah, thick but fast. That's the API for you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I know how hard I can drive the stereo bus. I know how hard I can drive individual channels, and it's fun to drive like a sports car. So I love working on that console for the extra character that it can add to the record. In terms of my master bus, it's a little different for certain projects, things that perhaps I want to sound a little bit more modern, sparkly, bright. I might add something different, but I tend to rely on a Chandler Curve Bender EQ. That's my first stop. And then I go into a Shadow Hills mastering compressor, which I love the sound of. And having used a lot of other compressors on the stereo bus, I keep going back to that. It's just got a beautiful tone. Yeah. Really, really great tone.
What's the job of the Curve Bender, the EQ on the master bus?
Curve Bender is a pretty aggressive, punchy EQ. So mostly I'm adding a crack of top, a crack of bottom, occasionally a crack of mid-range, but mostly it's a little bit of top and bottom. And I'll also, as the last stop in my chain, I have a Cush Clariphonic EQ, which I really like. It's a very subtle but broad EQ. It's like a fantastic tone control, you know.
Yeah.
But it's not an EQ that things get phasey or funny. Yeah. It's just adding a little bit of air, a little bit of clarity to the mix.
To my understanding, it's kind of like a parallels EQ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Now, as far as the monitoring goes, are there speakers that you really have to have in the room to be able to do what you're doing?
There isn't, but I have my favorites. For years, I've worked on tannoys. I've had tannoy 10s forever, and I've mixed, I don't know how many records on those, but speakers I love to change up. I feel like sometimes I repeat myself too much, or my records all start to sound the same, and it really bugs me. I hate ever having to have a sound.
Right.
You know, I really like to change the sound up for every artist. So over the last year, I've been experimenting with a lot of different speakers, and I finally settled on a pair of ATC 45s.
And they're beautiful stuff.
Yeah, they're the mid-range on the mid-range on the tannoy. You know, it's a very old school design of that coaxial tweeter, but it does a thing where it pushes the mid-range out of the speaker and in your face, and it forces you to deal with balances, just like the old oratomes that people used to use, where they're nothing but mid-range. And you're really forced to sit there and make spots for every instrument.
Is that one of the most essential things in a speaker, is probably mid-range detail?
Yeah.
Especially at the mixing stage.
Absolutely, in the mixing stage, absolutely. You know, obviously accuracy in the low end, but I never use a subwoofer. I don't believe in them. I mean, they're fun to listen to, but I find that if I mix
useful necessarily in mixing. You seem to be a guy who really enjoys gear, who really likes using and thinking about the subtle differences while you're working with it. Are there any really essential pieces in your racks that you're really glad that you have, aside from the master bus stuff and the API? And is there any really cheap stuff that you've been surprised by that you get a ton of use out of?
Well, cheap stuff, you know, I use guitar stomp boxes all the time.
Sure.
Obviously, when I'm recording, and I think the rule of thumb is if it says keyboard distortion pedal, the one thing I make sure I do is never use it on a keyboard, because it usually doesn't sound good on a keyboard, but it will sound good on a vocal or a drum or whatever it is. But I do tend to use a lot of cheap stomp boxes. I think they have a lot of character, and I'll use them when I mix. I'll send a bus out to a pedal. In fact, the My Morning Jacket album, I did a lot of processing of vocals with the Eventide delay pedal and the Eventide space reverb pedal. And I would print those delays and print those reverbs. In fact, sometimes within a song, I might have a half a dozen playlists of different types of delays and different times of delays. And I would then go and kind of make a comp of my delay pedals. So I would use this type of delay for the verse, this type of delay for the chorus, this type of reverb in the verse, these two reverbs in the chorus, whatever it might be. I found those Eventide pedals were really studio quality in terms of the frequency response, but they also had a lot of character. So I'll use stomp boxes all the time. And in terms of outboard gear, it's all the standard stuff from LA2As and 1176s. I love the Chandler stuff. Anything Wade makes is great. It has a lot of character, and I'll use that. Plugins, decapitators, and all the Sound Toy stuff is fantastic. There's so many plugins now you start relying on. Even the Avid channel strip I find is really clear, clean EQ. The Fab filter is great. All the UAD stuff, I can't live without my UAD satellite. I take that everywhere I go. I mean, it's just, I think the plug-in emulations are far superior to anything that's out there. The Pultec and the 1176, among other things, are just fantastic. So that gets used an awful lot. I'm fortunate in that I'm at Sunset Sound, where they have real EMT plates. They also have real live plaster-walled echo chambers, and nothing beats that. Nothing beats the random quality that a true analog reverb will give you, how it changes from moment to moment, how it changes when the humidity is different.
There's physics involved in a very real way.
In a very real way. And as you sit there working on your mix, it changes as you add more and more things into the live chamber. The tone of the chamber starts to sound different, and you sort of all of a sudden find, I can't put that many instruments in there because it saturates, and it's just this living, breathing organism in your mix, and there's nothing like it.
And even, I don't want to say above and beyond sound, but in addition to sound, even if there isn't an argument to be made for sound, it feels like when you're working with those kinds of tools, there's less looking, right? Isn't there, when you're working with analog tools as opposed to some of the digital ones?
Well, I think that with digital tools, there's more variations you can make within that one plugin, for instance. And you can take a UAD emulation of an EMT 140 plate and make it do things that a normal EMT plate might not do. You can tweak the pre-delay or the EQ in manners that you'd never get a real plate to act, and where, for the most part, analog sounds have one character, and that's what they are. You don't have a lot of variation within them, but they are analog instruments, and they act differently, just like a guitar might act differently from moment to moment. A reverb chamber will too.
All right, well, thanks one more time to Joe Chiccarelli. Thank you to Avatar Recording Studios for having us, and thank you to B&H for sponsoring this shoot. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. Go to sonicscoop.com, go to B&H.com, sign up for the newsletter there, where you can find out about more great video interviews like this one as they come out. Thanks again for hanging out with us. See you next time.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.